What's up, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you're now tuning into another episode of the Pro-Black Blurred Kingdom Podcast. So today I've got an interesting topic for y'all. This is something that I talked about before on social media. So if you follow me on Colas Creative, then you probably have heard me talk about this one time before in the past. That being maybe a couple months ago, maybe a month ago or whatever. So today I want to talk to you all about the Black Tech Support Trope. So I want to dive a little bit into what that means, what that looks like, give y'all some examples, and why this is something that, in my opinion, and probably in the opinion of a lot of other black people as well too, is a problem. It's something that we should not be happy about. It's something that we should also take note of when we're watching a lot of these comic shows and movies and any continuity that has black people where they're showing some type of subservience to white people from a technological standpoint. So let's break down what a Black Tech Support Trope looks like and what it is. So when I mention or talk about Black Tech Support, what I'm really talking about is a character who is black, and we're speaking right now in the context of looking at some type of comic TV show or comic movie, and this person is a sidekick to the hero, or is probably maybe a third in command even. They may not even be like second person down, like the person who would take the mantle of whatever this superhero was next. It's not even necessarily that. So in other words, this individual is either second, third, maybe fourth, maybe even fifth. It really just kind of depends on what continuity that we're talking about here. But the idea is that this character is being, in my opinion, I'm going to say they're being bug broken to a point where you don't see their strength, you don't see them shine as a main hero, you don't see them shine in superiority to the other characters. You see them as, again, very recessive and just an afterthought to the main hero. And they're like Tails to Sonic. And I mean, realistically, they're kind of like, if you're a Sonic the Hedgehog fan like me, they're like Amy Rose to Sonic, if I'm being real. They're not even Tails. They're not Knuckles even. So these types of characters are typically really intelligent, right? They usually are good with computers, good with some type of gadget. They're able to invent something, or they're able to manipulate something scientifically that helps the hero to be able to save the day. In other words, it's like a thankless position that also doesn't really show them in a position of power. It shows them as if their only strength is their intellect. Now, let's be clear. Black people from the beginning of time have been the most inventive, the most intelligent, the most creative beings that have ever existed on this planet. So that's no discrepancy whatsoever. I am not disputing that at all. But what I am saying is, the issue that I see is that it's being taken in a context where now it looks weak. And the reason why is because whenever you see a television show, it's written to give power to the main protagonist and the most power to the main protagonist in a way where the other characters kind of just support what the protagonist is doing if they are on the side of the protagonist, if you follow me. So my issue is that in the tech support role, there's not really any power for real. They're a supportive character, and they use their intellect and their abilities to manipulate tech as their power when they're basically a side-by-side to the main superhero. So the reason why I call them Black Tech Support is because I believe that is being done on purpose. Whenever you look at white society, specifically white society who's creating these comics and creating these different TV shows and movies, there is clearly a trend of making a black person the tech person for a white superhero who's portrayed to be a superhero or some type of super vigilante or protagonist who is the most dominant and most in power and who wants to shine the most. So in other words, these other characters, again, are an afterthought. So it's almost as if they're in kind of a way pissing on their intellect as if it's, somewhat of a sign of weakness in a way. And that's kind of a shame because back in the day, it was glorified that blacks would be known for their feats in scientific endeavors and their feats in technology and then their feats in being able to create and invent things. That was a badge of honor. And now it's been used as a trope that represents weakness in comics and weakness in like comic TV shows and weakness in comic movies, etc. So let's dive into that a bit and talk about some examples of where that is kind of existed. So the first example I want to talk about is in the Arrowverse TV show Arrow. If you look and you watch Arrow, or if you watched it at least through the 5th or 6th season, you get to see a good whiff of this. But they introduce a character whose name is Curtis. Curtis is supposed to be Mr. Terrific. And if you are into DC Comics, you know who Mr. Terrific is. He's a very intelligent brother who was known as basically one of the greatest intellectual, technological scientists in DC Comics. He's a character in Arrow. So he's one of the sidekicks to Oliver Queen. To me, he is, out of all of the examples that I can think of, is probably the worst example of worst probably isn't the best word. He is probably the most definitive and the most obvious example of Black Tech Support as I'm describing it. So in other words, if you look at the character Curtis, he's a black male who essentially has a lot of tech skills. But if you look at his fighting abilities, it looks like he's not quite as good as some of the other characters that fight alongside Oliver Queen. So he's not quite as good as the Roy Harpers or, characters like that. And some people may listen to me and they may say, well, what about John Diggle? Blah, 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 blah. And my point to that is there's another trope with him. We ain't going to get into that today, but we're just going to leave John Diggle out the conversation right now because there's some other shit that's going on with his character. But again, I ain't going to go into that. I'm just trying to simply discuss Curtis and why he's the worst example. So, if you look at the character, they made him a gay black man. First of all, they didn't have to make him gay, so they already feminized the brother. Now, mind you, I have no problems with LGBT. I do not have issues with them personally. But I do notice that there are agendas and ways that a lot of LGBT characters are written on TV that are written in a way where they're getting either grouped or shown as more important to a lot of these like black characters, or just the idea of promoting black people and the idea of showing proper black faces. The idea of showing more LGBT characters is what I'm getting at, is more important a lot of times in media. And I would say most times in media, it's shown as more important. And what they do sometimes is they take like these characters that are black and they make them LGBT. So now it doesn't just become a black statement alone. It becomes a black and LGBT statement that ends up just becoming an LGBT statement. And the reason why I say that is because if they really wanted to make it about black people, they wouldn't add other things to it. They would make this individual black and they would put like male or female, and they would put them in a heterosexual relationship. So in other words, it would be a black male and a black female together in a functional relationship. That to me is a good example of portraying us in a light where we're properly represented. Because from my perspective, that adheres to wanting to this couple to create more black children. So from my logical standpoint, it helps to keep that cycle going of properly raised, properly brought up black children who become very great, influential, and functional black adults who continue to be with other black people. When you make the statement LGBT, then you throw in other factors there. And it's not really the same thing, honestly. Now, again, I don't want to get too deep into the LGBT thing. I'm just simply making the point that a lot of times I think that these agendas get put out there and they use all of these different groups. So I think what I'm basically saying is black people get used and abused, and also black LGBT people also are kind of getting played to the side as well too, but they really just don't a lot of them don't really know it. So it's more about like the agenda than it is having an issue with the LGBT community. And again, I'm not even trying to over justify it. I'm just simply trying to break down, what the point I'm trying to make across. But anyway, going back to Curtis. So he's black and he's LGBT, right? Now, I believe that they did that to make him seem like weaker. I'm just going to be totally honest. They really just don't want to show a lot of black men who are in power, who are powerful, who are able to give orders to other people, who other people listen to, and who are in functional relationships with beautiful black women. They do not want to see that, so they always have to throw something else in there. So that's why a lot of these tropes happen. They throw in that this person is good with tech. So now it looks like they're a nerd who is not powerful, and not somebody who has super strength, or somebody who has like these elemental powers or something like that, and they're the main character. Or they make this person, again, a sidekick, so now they're subservient to a white person, so now it's looking a little slavish. Or they make them a carbon copy, So in this case, they made this brother basically a LGBT and black character. Then they also made him tech support because they made him really smart, but then they made it seem like his fighting skills weren't really all that. Now, if you look at this example in particular, it's pretty bad, because if you look at Curtis, he's even as a tech support subservient. He's subservient to Felicity Smoke. Now, anybody who pays attention to the show Arrow, Felicity Smoke is the love interest in the TV show of Oliver Queen. And like the main love interest, the person he ends up marrying and having a kid with, etc., etc. Well, having one of his kids with. So, anyway, Felicity Smoke is supposed to be like the top tech nerd of Arrow, but she's also the love interest, and to some extent she kind of just takes over the damn show at a certain point. At one point I was like, damn, this show should be called Overwatch. It shouldn't even be called Arrow no more. And I think that was like around maybe like season 7 or some shit like that. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that Curtis was even shown to be not even as intelligent as her. So it's almost as if he was put to be tech support, but they also threw in LGBT with that, and now they made him seem weaker and weaker, because now he's not even as good in tech as Felicity, a white female character who, if you are paying attention very closely, represents white feminine. Well, there's no such thing as white feminism. Feminism is a white woman movement, but represents a feminism, basically. That's what Felicity Smoke represents. She represents a symbol of feminism, because if you look at the show, she pretty much took it over at a certain point. It didn't even really become about Oliver anymore. Just the way that they wrote it, the messages that they were kind of showing, etc., etc. If you look, that's kind of the direction they were going. So you mean to tell me this brother, who was supposed to be the most intelligent, or one of the most intelligent technological innovators in DC Comics, is now second? Now, first of all, he's second to another person in the show in tech, and it happens to be a white woman. And then he's also like third or fourth, maybe even below that, to Oliver Queen, who is the main white superhero of the series. To me, they did everything that they could to make this brother seem weak. And really, Mr. Terrific should have been propped up a little better than what he was. Now, mind you, a lot of people didn't really know about Mr. Terrific unless you were heavy into DC Comics, right? But at the same time, you need to think about it like this. They threw everything that they could on this character in order to make him seem like he just wasn't really that strong, or he wasn't really that important. And that's the issue that I have. The issue that I have is that this happens far too often. Some people could say, Oh, well, that's just one example. But I can think of a couple other examples that portray this trope in a way where, you know, if you're really looking into it deep, you realize that there's a lot of BS that's going on. So let's talk about another instance. Another instance is my man Luke Fox. So, obviously, it seems like the CW has a trend of doing this in their TV shows to their characters. So a lot of people are going to make that argument. They're going to say, yeah, the CW does this, the CW does this. And I'm like, it's not just the CW, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the CW does have a bad habit of taking like some of these characters that are black and then putting tropes on them and then turning them into just weaker characters than like the main white superhero. They just don't seem as important, or they just seem like an afterthought. So let's take a look at Luke Fox. So Luke Fox, if you all don't know, is like the sidekick to Batwoman. And he is the sidekick to all of the Batwomen that existed. And the reason why I say that is because you had a couple different Batwomen who were there. You had Kate Kane Batwoman, which was a white LGBT woman who was Batwoman. And then you had Ryan Wilder, who played as Batwoman in the TV show for season 2 and season 3. Now let's talk about that for a second. Now, the thing that I didn't like about the issue with Luke was Luke, if you ever read DC Comics, was supposed to be Batwing. That's the superhero that he was. Like, that was his superhero name and persona, right? And if you look at the design of Batwing, I mean, shit looks sweet. I mean, literally. Batwing has a dope costume. It has like the kind of I wouldn't say fluorescent blue, that's not the right word. It has like that kind of like clean bluish tint to it, like his suit does. He has like the kind of like light fluorescent blue bat symbol in the middle of his chest. Brother is muscular, he's intelligent, he's a good fighter, everything. So everything you can think of that you want a black character. So the problem is that his TV show really should have been a standalone. He should not have been, in my opinion, a sidekick to Batwoman. The reason why I say that is because he's too cool of a character for him to have played second fiddle to a character that he is cooler than, and from my perspective. And I think that they did that once again to undermine blackness and undermine black men, essentially. Because again, they took another LGBT statement and then they made it of greater importance than black people and promoting black people. And if you look at the case of Luke Fox, this is also prevalent there too. He's tech support. He's very intelligent. He was helping Kate with her suit. He was helping Ryan out with her suit. He was helping them both in the field. I know some of y'all are going to be like, well, Ryan is black, and y'all get into that bullshit. But the bottom line is that that's another LGBT statement. They only threw Ryan in there as a black person because of the whole George Floyd thing being a trend. That's another topic for another day. I'm not going to get into that right now. I just don't have the energy to do that at this moment. But at the same time, what I'm trying to say here is it was an LGBT statement. They were trying to promote LGBT characters over black characters. So the issue that I have with a character like Luke Fox is Luke Fox has everything, and they found a way to make him look weak because they made him look like a nerd. And even if you look at the actor, and mind you, this is no slam on the brother, I think he's actually a pretty good actor. To me, I actually envisioned this, and this is just my personal opinion, the actor who played Batwing to be a little bit bigger and a little bit more muscular. Now, mind you, I haven't seen the dude in person, so I can't really, see if what I'm seeing on TV reflects like the way my man looks like in person. And obviously, I'm not trying to size him up in that way. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I expected just a more muscular and a little bit bigger Batwing So he would have a different look to me. I felt like they did everything in their power to get somebody who just portrayed this nerd persona, and that's cool. I have no problem with nerds. I'm a nerd myself. I'm a blurred. We're blurs. Hold on, we got to make that correct here. We're blurs out here, y'all. We're blurs. But they gave him that blurred persona, and that's cool. And I could even roll with that. That's cool. Like I have no problem with Cameron Johnson, the actor who plays Batwing. But what I don't like is that they made him so much of a tech nerd that now it's like they want to try to shift that narrative now in season 2 and season 3. They want to give him the Batwing mantle now, but it kind of feels like his fighting abilities and all that he had when he in DC Comics is an afterthought, or just not something that people believe to have known him for in the Arrowverse series. So in other words, if you look at the Batwing series, Batwing as a character, there was a couple iterations of Batwing, but we're talking about just the Luke Fox Batwing. He was a scholar who had all these different career paths that he could have taken, right? All these different career paths. And his father, Lucius Fox, which was one of the right hands to Batman and Wayne Enterprises, wanted him to like essentially take one of those paths. But he was like, nah, I'm trying to get out here. I'm trying to fight for justice. And, he was a martial artist. He was out here like fighting and training and doing the work to become a top-notch martial artist out here, And so they're not really showing that in the Arrowverse. They're showing that he is trying to maybe get a little training in here or there, but they don't make it like a big deal for him. Whereas, this literally warped this brother's whole pathway. His whole pathway got warped differently and just turned into something just that it just wasn't before. He was supposed to be a scholar tech dude who basically got job offers from every industry all over the world or tech industry all over the world, and instead he was like, I'm about to go out here and I'm about to start whooping some ass. And they just didn't really make it seem like that. What they did was they ended up doing some trauma sauce type shit in Batwoman, and they had him get beat down by the police, and some white dude was like the cause of it because the white dude was trying to act like he was like woke or some shit, quote unquote woke, like he was one of those woke white boys. And then when the police came around, he was sitting there talking about he tried to rob him when it really was the other way around. And they tried to turn that into he wants justice for what happened to him, so now we're going to make him Batwing. Instead of basically saying under the brother's own will, he wanted to be a fighter and he wanted to go out here and start whooping some ass. To me, that's totally different. They stuck in like throwing in some trauma sauce, and then they undermined his desire to be a great fighter. And so they continue to undermine it because if you look, they make it seem like he relies so much on that suit. So he creates this he basically has his Batwing suit, right? He has his Batwing suit, and then he has this ability to just monitor tech for Ryan. But if he is forced to use the Batwing suit, it's almost as if he's relying on the suit's abilities for him to be able to fight and do what he has to do in the streets, to help Ryan. It doesn't really feel like he's like fighting is his main shtick. So to me, as smart as I want him to be, because the character also was very intelligent, it's like they lean so much on that and they give him a backseat to Ryan, and they definitely gave him a backseat to Kate because Batwing wasn't even really a thing at that point. We just heard that was Luke Fox, and so a lot of people when they saw it, they were like, oh, that's Batwing. He about to be Batwing. But the truth is, y'all, Batwing should have had his own story. His story is way too cool, way too interesting. One of the Batwings was called the Batman of Africa. And you mean to tell me that he got to play second fiddle to Batwoman, an LGBT character? No, that was done on purpose. That was totally done on purpose. And that's another example. I'll give you another example. And this is, just looking at the women. If you look at the show, the DC TV show Stargirl, they took Beth. If you don't know who Beth is, Beth basically ended up becoming the second Dr. Midnighter for the Justice Society of America, or the new Justice Society of America that was made by Courtney. Courtney is Stargirl. So, and the example with her, she's also tech support. She manipulates different technology, and she uses it to try to help Courtney and the other members to be able to fight against their enemies. Mind you, all the other members of the JSA are fighters, right? You got her, you got I can't think of her name right now, her friend, the chick who like is like the cat. I don't want to call her Black Cat. It might be Black Cat, whatever her name is, but she got like the kitty claws. And then you got the other dude, the other white boy who was like super strong. So you got all them, and they can fight. But she the only black character, and she can't fight. She's a nerd. She works on tech. And not only that too, not only is she a nerd, she's docile, right? She lets her parents run all over her. Mind you, I get it, she a kid, but I mean, like, she literally has become like the parent because they refuse to take care of her. And they just run all over her. She be making them breakfast, she be cleaning up the crib, she be doing all types of stuff for them while they going through their little divorce. Like, literally, all the characters just ignore her and act like she's an afterthought. She's not seen as strong. And the only time that they tried to even focus on her quote-unquote strength was the episode where they decided to just randomly make Eclipso, who was the villain of season 2 of DC Stargirl, a racist. They made Eclipso a racist. And that was really random because before every other episode that we had watched of DC Stargirl, Eclipso was never really a racist. They just threw that in there randomly on episode like 7 or something like that. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, like, you know, they just threw that in there because they wanted to point at Beth's race. And if you look at where they live in Nebraska, and they live in this area called, I think, was it called Blue Valley or something like that. And the area that they live in, there's basically no other black characters. They just threw in another black kid who's friends with Courtney's brother, but like there wasn't really like black kids like that for real, and there definitely weren't black kids who were central focuses of the show, kind of like Courtney and the rest of her friends and even her enemies. Her enemies were white too. And so all these people, they can fight, but you mean to tell me Beth can't fight? Beth has to be the person who's able to manipulate tech to help Courtney and the others. Beth has to be, and not only that, she's also docile and she's weak. So now, here we go now. That's 3 examples here. So let's just review so you all are staying with me so it doesn't seem like I'm rambling here. You had Curtis, Mr. Terrific, who was presented as an LGBT character, right? And he also was even a second fiddle tech support character. Okay, you got Luke Fox, who was tech support, who could have been the main star to an LGBT character. Then you have Beth in DC Stargirl, who was tech support and also docile. She didn't challenge people. She got ran over and bulldozed by every other character all the time. Was made to be an afterthought and was only concentrated on when it was time to do some trauma sauce, when they made Eclipso, the main villain, a racist out of nowhere. And for some reason they never talked about his issues with race in any other episode. Just in the episode where Eclipso and Beth had kind of faced off against each other. That was weird to me. Now, let me talk about an example that really, really kind of just got under my skin and kind of just leads me to what will be a topic for another conversation. Let's talk a little bit about Phastos. So, I don't know if any of y'all ever seen the movie Eternals or The Eternals. I don't know what you call it. Eternals, The Eternals, who gives a shit? It was a terrible movie. I mean, okay, it wasn't terrible, but it was pretty bad. It was pretty mediocre, I guess, is the best way to describe it. Phastos was a character in Eternals, as I just said, and he was most definitely tech support in that movie. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you look at the character Phastos, or in the comics, not in the movie that we saw in the theaters. If you look at the character in the comics, he looks like he could be non-white, but it's not necessarily explicitly clear whether or not he is even black in the comics, right? they made it a very, very big deal, right? To tell everyone before Eternals came out that they had this black character who was representing the character Phastos for the Marvel's Eternals. And this example, by the way, y'all, is why I say stop leaning on the Arrowverse and blaming the issue on Arrowverse and start realizing that this is the existence of white supremacy in comics, comic TV shows, and comic movies. So don't blame it on, oh, it has to be this thing. Blame it on the mission and the goal and the uncodedness that goes on with the white dominated society. So let's talk about that a little bit further. If you look at the character Phastos, he was tech support. But then they also made him a black guy. They made it clear he was a big black guy. They also made him gay. And again, I want to keep emphasizing the issue here is not with him being gay. The issue is what they're trying to make gayness look like and how they're trying to make that more important, or at least they're trying to use that to water down blackness. So, if you look at the character Phastos was basically tech support. He was helping the other Eternals to fight off the deviants. He was not really fighting them himself, because most of the fighting was handled by Gilgamesh, Thena, Icarus, and when she was deciding not to be a damn punk, Cersei, who was the main character. Because let's be real, Cersei was not that great of a main character. She wasn't likable, she wasn't relatable, and she just seemed very meek. She seemed like a meek side character who they forced to take up the mantle as main character. But we'll talk about Eternals on another video or podcast. But, I just want to throw that out there. Now, let's talk about Phastos and his role a little more. Phastos was put as a black LGBT character who essentially was not really on par as a fighter with the other characters, despite the fact that they had a quote-unquote diverse cast. Think about it. They had white people. They had not Hispanic. They had an Indian guy. They had an Asian person, which was supposed to be Cersei. They had all these different representations of groups. And mind you, the black character, and some of you all are probably listening to this and they're saying, oh, well, the fast chick, she was black too, but that was a whole nother issue and we're not going to talk about that in this episode. But they made the black man, he was the only black man, like only clearly big black, dark-skinned even black man in that whole crew. They made him LGBT, and they made him basically with powers that were not as prevalent, important, or I guess powerful as the other characters. Really, to be honest, he basically didn't really serve much of a purpose except as a holdover until the main character was able to defeat the villain. So let's talk about that for a second. I don't know if any of you all are Dragon Ball Z fans, but I wanted to kind of make a mention to the Majin Buu Saga, specifically the saga where they're fighting Kid Buu. So you got Goku, you got Vegeta, and I guess at some point you had Fat Buu. Fat Buu was the real kid-like one, the real fat kid-like one. So Fat Buu, at a certain point, was fighting Kid Buu to try to help Goku and Vegeta. And at some point, Vegeta was trying to fight Kid Buu in order to hold him off. And if you remember that fight correctly, Vegeta was getting dragged. Vegeta almost got erased out of existence. And the reason why is because Vegeta was not strong enough to really fight Kid Buu for real. He was trying to hold Kid Buu off because Goku was trying to build up a spirit bomb so he could throw it at Kid Buu so he could eliminate him. Now, it was very clear that Vegeta was not as strong as Kid Buu, because Kid Buu was just dragging him. He was beating the hell out of him. It was so bad, even Goku noticed, and Goku was like, "Forgive me, Vegeta," because he knew that this dude was about to get wiped out, right? That's who Fastos was in Eternals. He was Vegeta. Now, he wasn't getting dragged the same way Vegeta was, because that was brutal. But he was holding back Icarus, who had turned on the other Eternals because of his beliefs and his opinions about the way things should go, so that Cersei could put a stop to the shit that he was doing. That's all he was good for, though. He was not fighting Icarus for real, though. He wasn't powerful enough to fight Icarus. But that's my point. Why is this big black man, right, the weakest out of the Eternals? Why is he the only character who just has tech powers, but for some reason he ain't really all that strong? Why? There ain't no way that that's a coincidence. There's no way that's a coincidence. And black people, this is my message to y'all today. This is my message to y'all. When you see this type of shit, when you go into movies or you watch TV shows, you are not required to, 1, be grateful just because you see a black face. 2, you are not required to be grateful, right, because of the fact that you have representation. 3, you are not required to sit and ingest something that because it just shows our people at the fear that we are bringing down another black person or not celebrating all black people. And that's why I made the statement of, I don't really have an issue with black LGBT people, because black LGBT people have been around for a long time. I mean, think about James Baldwin. That brother was LGBT, but the bottom line is that his eyes were wide open. Let's just say that his eyes are really, really wide open. He made a lot of statements and did a lot of things that black people from all over the diaspora can resonate with. So the issue that I have is that when you take a character who is LGBT and you make it that them being LGBT is almost more important than them being black and them being shown as powerful and black, then there's an issue. So there's not really an issue with seeing a black LGBT character, but seeing a black LGBT character who is made to look weak, and they're using them being gay or lesbian, whatever the case is, as a proxy to look weak. So in other words, they're LGBT and they're a side character. You don't really see black characters who are LGBT and they're like the main character. Outside of, like I said, Ryan, but again, that's a whole nother issue. And again, we'll talk about that in another video. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is that we are not required to celebrate characters when there are clearly scurvy things that are being done to our people. Okay? I want you all to understand that it is not homophobic. It is not self-hate or coonish, or as y'all like to say, Uncle Tomish. And by the way, I want to say something about that. A lot of you all talk about Uncle Toms, blah, 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 blah. Uncle Tom was not the issue, y'all. It was Sambo. If you want to talk about somebody who was a real coon and a sellout, talk about Sambo, not Uncle Tom. I just want to make that statement real quick. But anyway, going back, the point that I'm trying to make to y'all is it's not homophobic, or you're not a sellout or a coon or wrong or anything, any other label that you might get because you disagree with the way your people are being treated and the way that your people are being portrayed and the way that your people are being done. You are not, and I mean not any of those things, because you won't stand for that. Please understand that this is the way that we should be thinking when we are seeing these comic TV shows and these comic movies, okay? So, the point and the lesson in all this here is Black Tech Support is wrong because it takes the idea that blacks were intellectuals and uses it as a weapon to show them or see them as weaklings and subservient to a white superhero who is the star getting all the glory for beating ass. It's not cool, y'all. Y'all shouldn't let it fly, and I promise you that I will not do so either. Okay? Now, when it comes to the Black Tech Support Trope, these examples are not the only examples I can think of. They are the most prevalent examples that I can think of as of right now. I could literally write an entire excerpt even on it. And I mean, we've been here, podcasting, me talking, you listening, almost 45 minutes now, right? And I've given you 45 minutes of content and examples to exemplify how these tropes exist, how they show up, how you see them, and where you can point them out best at. So that's my opinion. My opinion is, if you want to see black people thrive in a way where they're presented in the most appropriate way, stop allowing and celebrating when these white media sources put out black characters for sakes of diversity, and start looking at the messages and then go back, interpret that, and say, you know what? This is why we need our own thing. We need our own thing because they're going to tell our stories in a way that we do not want them to tell our stories. And then they're going to make it seem like we need to agree with how they've written it, or we get canceled because then we get some type of weird label, like, again, homophobic or something like that, because we don't agree with the way that our people are being written in these stories. That is my biggest issue with a lot of these tropes. We need to really seriously, y'all, consider creating our own stories, getting our own production studios, getting our own channels on television, because again, a lot of people always talk about television is poison, television is poison, yada 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 yada, and I don't disagree with people, but this is a new perspective that I think a lot of people don't think about. Why do y'all think it's poison? It's poison because of who is controlling it and what they're putting out there. What if we had control over the things that we put out there and what we teach our people and what we teach other people? And black people are probably the perfect people to be dominant in that form of media. And you know why? Because our asses are always looking out for everybody else except our damn selves. So that's what our people are naturally going to damn do. But the problem is that we're not looking out for number one. And if you look on any of those media sources, that's what they're doing with our people, with their people. And that's the reason why our people are getting poisoned when they look on TV, because they're not showing us in a light that presents us in a way where we look powerful, where we look dominant, and we look like we have some type of, as a lot of them like to say, equity or even equality, I guess, with everybody else in society. All right, y'all. That's all I got for today. I will be coming to you all with a couple more new episodes coming soon. I want you all to, if you like this, share it with your friends, share it with your family, share it with whoever. Let other people know that what I had to say resonated with you. I gave you a lot of thought-provoking things to really consider, and continue to just let everybody know, spread the word that I got a lot of messages to get out there to black people, especially as it pertains to the blurred world. Because really, to be honest, we got a lot of dope ideas, and we could be in control of them if we just stop just accepting anything. All right, y'all. This was your boy. I can't even speak today. This was your boy Cool Colas. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.